What's up, ladies and gentlemen? The one and only James Williams, Dog Waters, and I'm back. And I need you to hit that like button. Bing, bong, bang, bang, bing, bing. This interview is with Antonio Gasofo from the Gateway Pundit. It's a great interview. You're going to enjoy the conversation. We run the gambit of topics from Ukraine to Russia to China to his background with the Free Burma Army, the Free Burma military. This interview runs the gambit of topics, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So without any further ado, I'll ask you to hit the like button, and then let's get the ball rolling. This is one you're going to sit back, relax, and play in the car or play while you're cooking or cleaning. It's a very long interview, but I think you'll enjoy it. Deuces. Hold on one second. We're about to get to the bottom of this, ladies and gentlemen. This don't make no sense whatsoever. Welcome to the Dark Waters channel, where we explore mysteries, figure out the truth, dive into politics, and anything else you want to know about. That's what we're doing over here, baby. Let's go. We all to the races. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, the one and only James Williams is here, and I want to tell you guys something. When we start to talk about the concept of politics, political science, political commentary, on every TV channel you turn on every radio station you turn on, people are talking about politics. Now, when I was a young man, and I'm in my 40s, when I was in my early 20s, you would turn on the radio and politics wasn't just the most important issue. The reason why the politics is the most important issue right now is because the world is at war, ladies and gentlemen, and we are facing adversaries that I would say are not only demonically infested and infused, but they have a plan, a coordinated plan of attack that is an assault on the Western world, that's an assault on culture, that's an assault on everything beautiful and lovely that God created. And I know you may be thinking to yourself as you listen to me talk right now, what is this guy saying? What I'm saying is simple. We have to understand that this warfare that we find ourselves in the middle of, this battle that you want to ignore, that you want to tune out from because it becomes overwhelming, because you don't want to hear about it. And I see it in the comments every day. Well, James, I'm tired of hearing about politics. I don't want to hear it anymore, man. This battle that we're in, ladies and gentlemen, is a battle for more than just your attention. It's a battle for your soul. And more importantly, it's a battle for the soul of your bloodline. So if you have a son or a daughter or a niece or nephew, the reason why we got to this situation is because we stopped educating them. It's because our forefathers didn't tell us, hey, there's a such thing as a socialist and a communist, and this is what they do. And then they try and come in and divide the racial group. So if you see them coming, kill them. Nobody told us that. So here we are today. So unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I can't let you off the hook. You can't back down. You can't run. You can't hide, ladies and gentlemen. You can't run away. We're not going to let you do that. And in that same vein, I have Antonio Gasofo with me today, and we're gonna from Gateway Pundit. He writes articles for Gateway Pundit. We're gonna touch on the geopolitical things that are going on, and it's important that we understand. I mean, truly understand, not just turn on the news and be like, watch them say, "Well, oh, Ukraine bombed Russia today," and they give you like a little snippet, and you don't understand what it means. And that's what I'm reaching out to Antonio for today. We want to know, what does it mean for them to drone strike Russia? When we know that Russia is a traditionally Christian Orthodox nation, what does it mean geopolitically? And that's the questions that people don't answer. Everybody just wants this surface, give you opinion. It's almost like it's like feeding you cow's milk from a bottle, just enough to satisfy your thirst and hunger for information. All right. I'm sorry. Antonio, how you doing today, my friend? How's everything going?
I'm doing great, James. Good to be here.
I'm sorry. I can be a little bit dramatic, but once I get the ball rolling, it just flows. It just
It's all
flows.
right, man. I agree with everything you said.
Let's talk about Russia, Ukraine. I'm going to tell you this. Sure. I can't stand Zelensky. I just can't. When I look at Zelensky, I feel like I'm looking at the little guy in high school that got bullied by everybody, that was like the weird kid in the lunchroom that somehow became the leader of a nation. I can't shake the feeling that he's a weirdo. And so I'm going to start with this question, because I know this is your thing. how did this weirdo get in power? Was this when Obama overthrew Ukraine that this weirdo was just thrust into power? Was that when he got in?
So basically, all the Eastern European countries, once the Soviet Union ended, they basically had to decide what form of government they were going to have and whether they were going to pivot west or pivot east. And the Ukrainian people, most of them wanted to pivot west. They want to be part of Europe. They don't want to be part of Russia. And so they voted for this guy, and that's it. So you've got a country where the vast majority of people would rather be European. They don't want to be part of Russia. And then you've got this Russia that thinks that Ukraine should be part of Russia.
Right. Gotcha. So let's get to the warfare. So we got war going on. It doesn't seem to benefit Ukraine in any way, shape, or form to be in this war, to extend this battle of war. It just doesn't seem to benefit them. When I look at the scenario, for example, when I see images of Zelensky meeting with Macron and Keir Starmer, again, it's almost like the little bitty nerdy guy from high school meeting with the bigger nerds, like Revenge of the Nerds, and they're like, yeah, we got your back against this Russian Putin guy. And then he comes out, he's like, I'm Zelensky, and I'm the greatest man in the world, and I'm going to bomb Russia, and I don't care if it leads to World War III. It just doesn't. Who's benefiting from this?
Yeah,
it just makes no sense.
This is really difficult for me. Just a little thing about my background is that I've been working in the war in Burma on and off over the last 20 years, and that's why I live over here, and I work with the army in Burma a good part of the year. So I have experience of being in war, being in this situation, and also of being on the side of the small army that's defending themselves against the big army.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a lot of empathy, but at the same time, Zelensky has no plan for victory. Rubio pushed him, right? I don't know if you saw this viral. Yeah. Rubio pushed him. He goes, well, what's your plan for victory? He's like, I don't have one. Well, what happened to the money we already sent you? I don't know. Okay, well, then we're not sending you more money. And Trump, a lot of people misinterpret Trump, or they don't understand it, is you have to kind of read between the lines, right? But like Trump effectively said, he goes, I want to make it clear to Zelensky that we don't have his back, because that's going to change the way he negotiates.
Right.
See, I think it's very important that we don't make false promises to Zelensky, because Zelensky, it's very different. You go into to negotiate with Putin and you believe America is going to back you up.
Yeah.
You're going to behave very differently than if you believe Belgium's backing you up. So, and the other thing is I work on the Taiwan conflict. It's a big part of my job is reevaluating China's military strength and then their threat to Taiwan, and then how that involves the U.S. And, our policy in Taiwan is called strategic ambiguity. That's actually the name of the policy. And what it means is that nobody knows whether the U.S. will or will not fight. We keep giving weapons to Taiwan. We're training their troops. We even put 500 troops in Taiwan now. We've done a lot of things that suggest that we would fight, but we have never come out and said that we would fight. And why do we do that? Because it's impossible for China to plan. It's very different planning. If you know U.S. is going to fight, you plan that way. If you don't know, it's very difficult. And so with Ukraine, we were in this situation where the Biden administration was, not that they came out and said they were going to fight for Zelensky, but they kept making it seem like they were going to fight for him, and that NATO would possibly bend their rules or use the same kind of rules that they used earlier, like in the 90s for a couple of the, some of the NATO actions in the 90s were not in NATO countries. Right. NATO expanded their mandate, and they said, we can go to combat in certain places if it's with the UN and these, criteria met or whatever. And it was very dangerous, and particularly with the U.S. being the leader of NATO. I mean, at the end of the day, whatever the U.S. decides, that's what the decision is going to be in NATO. And with the Biden administration, it was really dangerous that Biden could very easily have said, okay, well, let's go ahead and make this one of those exceptions, and we're going to go into Ukraine, and that's going to trigger World War III.
Right.
So yeah. I mean, so the other part of the comment, I just want to get this out and then hand it back over to you. But one more point is that I know there's a lot of people who have a different opinion on this, but Ukraine is a sovereign nation. They have the right to exist. They have the right to be independent of Russia. Nobody wants to be part of Russia. I mean, other than like Belarus, almost nobody wants to be aligned. In Serbia, almost nobody wants to be aligned with Russia. They want to be part of Europe. They don't want to be invaded by Russia. They have the right to exist. They are right. Putin invaded it. But, okay, how do we end it? Zelensky can't end it. And you said the other nerds are backing him up. I agree with you. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm laughing when I look at Europe. I'm like, oh yeah, you're going to send all 25 of your soldiers there
to go fight, right?
Yeah. And why is Europe doing that? Because they believe the U.S. has their back, and they're going to try and trigger Article 5, which does not apply if they go help Ukraine, and Russia attacks one of those European countries, they're going to cry Article 5, and I'm going to say no, it doesn't apply. And
I hope it won't apply, because I'm not trying to go die, have family members, friends, and draft start to go die over the Ukraine. I'm sorry, but I'm going to tell you, Antonio, what gets me and what has gotten under my skin, and I think this is where the average person in America is. You remember when the Ukraine war started, the barrage of like all these Facebook profiles with the Ukrainian flags. Like in my neighborhood right now, there's a lady and she has a Ukrainian flag hanging outside of her house. And I walk by and and she looks at me and says, "Hey, James." And I'm like, "You trick. Why do you have a Ukrainian flag flying on your doorstep and you're in America?" And it's just like, what is wrong with you? And it infuriates me that.
What about the Ukraine COVID mask?
Yeah. I mean, it's the psychological warfare that infuriates me.
Yes,
it really does. And I get what you're saying about strategic ambiguity, not knowing if we're going to fight or if we're not going to fight. I kind of want you to educate us more on that policy. So don't let me forget to come back to that. But let me just say this. And so I think the American people, there's only so much psychological operations you can run on a human mind, right? Before the human mind starts to tune out, and then it gets to the point
I think we're at a saturation
point, right? Yeah, we're at that point.
Yeah,
and then what happens once you get beyond the saturation point is it gets to where you reject it. Then once you reject it, then you aggressively reject it, and then after that, then it's warfare in the human mind. I think we're beyond the point of just saturation. We're at the point of aggressive rejection of it, and it's like these people don't get it. For example, I don't care about Ukraine, never did care about Ukraine. The only reason why Ukraine was brought into the lexicon of my mind or the context of my mind is because they forced it in with a psychological operation where I had to see people with the mask on. The average American citizen, frankly, does not care. And I think that's where we are. I know geopolitically it matters, but we just like, okay, it matters, but how much does it matter? We don't care. And that's the dangerous thing about what's going on. For example, Taiwan, I think Taiwan, China, is more of a threat than anything there is. I think China is more of a threat to America than anybody else. Point blank.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true. I mean, look, I do the threat assessment every year. That's part of my job. Every year, the intelligence community releases the annual threat assessment. Every year for the past 10 years, China has been the #1 threat. DHS now has their own threat assessment. Guess what? China's also the #1 threat on DHS. So remember that DHS and intelligence community are looking at two very different things, right? So like both in our homeland and abroad, China is the biggest threat. No doubt. Russia is #2.
Right. I'll tell you, #2. When I didn't realize how much of a threat China was until when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. It hits New Orleans. Everybody leaves. We come back. We start to rebuild. We start getting these contracts, right? And everybody's hanging out at the House of Blues Foundation room because the French Quarter got some water, but it wasn't really that bad. And so this is the only place where you can kind of go hang out and talk business. And then all these Chinese businessmen come in. And we sit there smoking cigars, and I never forget. And so this guy comes in, he's beautiful suit, and it was almost psychotic the way he talked. He was like, "Yes, Mr. Williams, it's my understanding that you have quite a bit of property you've acquired." And you thinking it's gonna be like this Chinese voice, but you could tell it was like, wait, who taught you this English? And who taught you this psychological talking? Because it was the perfect 30-second pause. You could tell it was like he was a military psychological operations guy for China. And he was like, "We would love to do business with you. And we understand." And then he hit me with the racial stuff. "We understand as an African American, you struggle with financing." And I was like, "Listen, I don't know you." I said, "But clearly you from China. And I guess you think you're gonna come to China and buy up all the property in New Orleans. My black behind is not helping you buy nothing in America as a Chinese person. I say I'd rather go to the most hole in the wall, redneck racist American and do business with him than do business with you. And he's like, you will come to regret this. I say, I bet I will. Get your ass out of here.
Yeah, they don't China, I spent 7 years in China, and I worked inside of a Chinese government think tank, and they do not understand, and they're always playing the race. They don't understand the race. They don't understand anything. They don't understand the race thing. They don't understand poverty. Like we read that 50% of Americans earn less than blah blah. I'm like, yeah, and that's 8 times what people in China earn.
Right.
And with me, they kept going. I still remember because they were trying to recruit me, and they're like, oh, you come from an immigrant family. Your family must have suffered a lot of, repression and racism. I'm like, my father loved this country. My grandfather wasn't even a citizen, and he joined the army. Like if I'd ever said anything bad, and I remember as a kid, like once or twice being influenced by the Vietnam protesters and saying something negative, and my dad just, bam, just instantly, bam, you never say anything bad about this country. And they just couldn't believe it. They're like, but you faced. I'm like, no, you don't understand. We still live better than everybody else
in the world. Yes.
Yeah. Well, then why are you complaining? Because we want to live a little better, which is fine. Which is absolutely fine, right?
From a threat assessment perspective, let's stick to China if you don't mind.
Sure.
Do you mind kind of talking about some of the tactics and techniques that you see that they're deploying? Because we talked about from Department of Homeland Security, right? And then we talked about from just them in warfare and battle. On the home front, do you mind talking about seeing some of the things that you're seeing them deploy that makes them a threat? Because I'm interested in hearing that.
Pro-Hamas protests.
That's them?
By China. Yeah. And also when you go on Twitter, when you go on Twitter, I assume you're on Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if you go on Twitter, right, and you see an account that's like an African-American person saying, I think everybody should get $300 million of reparations.
I know that's them. That has to be them.
Yeah, that's them. And then like some white guy saying something horrible, that's them. And then, or it's either China or Russia because they use really similar techniques. But there's a lot of bot accounts that either ridiculously supporting China or intentionally amplifying things that happen in the media, and then they amplify it, and it'll be some little thing happen. Like for example, this comes up all the time. Hawaii, there's like 0.1% of people in Hawaii that legitimately want to have a separate nation. Right. And they will amplify that because they think it's real. They think it's the same thing as like when the U.S. says you're committing genocide in Xinjiang or Hong Kong should have separate rights or something. And they're, what about Hawaii? What about all these people? What about the genocide you're doing in Hawaii? I'm like, no, I'm sure you found someone in Hawaii who called it a genocide, because they did lose their language in that. But like, yeah, so that's the kind of thing China does. So they get people fighting each other. They amplify a lot of things that are true, but they just make them bigger. Sometimes it's just a complete lie. And
how do you combat that though? Because I'll tell you one. Watch this. This is one I know had to come from China. I watched it bubble up. There, if you look around now, there's this thing called black fatigue, right? And it's going everywhere. Where it's like, oh, everybody has fatigue of these ghetto black people. And I'm sitting there watching it bubble up on Twitter. The first day it popped up, I said, let me go check the keywords. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know where psychological operations start, the track of those psychological operations is always going to be found on Google Trends. So if you go to Google Trends and you type in the keyword, and you can see the day it hit the marketplace, that thing started on like the 23rd of last month.
Yep.
And it hit and it spiked. I said, okay, let me go find it. And it was just one account. And then it traced a whole bunch of fake accounts that was like, yeah, black fatigue is this. And I started clicking the buttons, and they were all new accounts. Like someone just made them. They just on Twitter. And it was a vicious psychological operation that lasted for a week, maybe.
Right.
And why do they die out? I guess they die out so fast because of the attention span of the average person. But you can always tell because they hit the scene and they're gone in about no longer than 14 days. They're gone. So that's probably China too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. You're absolutely right on that. Now part of that, there's actually a rhythm of how you release, a message that you want to promote, and you do it like you said, like 14 days, and then you pull back. And then when you release it next time, now you've got an audience waiting. Oh, I
that's
remember
what they're
that from a
doing.
few weeks ago. Right? And
Got
then
it.
it amplifies it. The other thing is that you can trace media. So like I'll trace media that are running the same story. When I see something outrageous on Twitter, so then I'll come out of Twitter and I'll start searching what media are running this story. And you'll find it starts with like Chinese state media or media that I know are aligned by either Chinese state media or Russian state media. And then there are weak media in the States, like now, because there's so many newspapers and magazines that really have no money. So somebody who's willing to give you a free story, so they take it, they put it on their site or whatever, and then it just amplifies it. And people on Twitter, you know, if you argue with people, they're like, I know this is true because I saw it in 20 media. And I'm like,
Right.
oh
So
yeah, but it's the
that
same
up.
story 20
Yeah.
times.
They think it's realistically. They think it's realistic. That it's amazing, man. I really wish there was a way the average person could be educated on like just seeing through the propaganda.
Yeah.
Because that's the greatest strength they have is just propagandizing the American people. And social media has opened the door for that. How did historically, how do they defeat that?
Nobody knows. It's a good question. When I originally went through training, you know, it was the Cold War, and I was learning about Russia. And then the Cold War ended, and I never really used any of my Russia skills. So then fast forward a bunch of years, and then I'm in China, and then also I'm going through, you know, my training and this and that. And what we learned in the 80s about things like this, about this type of messaging and propaganda and how to analyze it and how to read it, it was so theoretical because it just like, I don't want to say it didn't exist, but now it's like, oh my God, it's right in front of me every day. It's like exactly what I learned in training is on Twitter every day, is on Facebook, is on YouTube. Because you could, you know, if you take your mind back to the 80s, well, where was this propaganda?
There was no mechanism for it, right? There was no mechanism to propagate the
there
propaganda.
was no mechanism, right? You know, they would go to college campuses and try and form organizations and then, you know, hand out pamphlets and stuff. But I mean, it was nothing like what you get now. And it's literally textbooks. So like I can literally open a textbook that I had at the military university and compare it to like what I'm observing on Twitter. And I'm like, oh my God, that's page 37.
Right.
That's chapter 8.
That's, in my opinion, that's the largest problem we have from foreign actors is the propaganda. And they were able to propagandize us to accept open borders with all these people coming in, which while the borders were open, they smuggled in, I mean, it had to be thousands of terrorists from all over the world.
And agents, Chinese agents.
And agents, which to me, that's the greatest threat. And I really struggle with this, Antonio. Like, what is it about the human mind that allows us as citizens not to see the threat that's clearly in front of you? Is that the propaganda? Or is that, I don't understand that.
I think there's some kind of Darwinism at work, you know, because think about this. Like,
gotcha.
Every time I see these signs like Queers for Palestine, and I always have to comment, Queers for Palestine live a lot better than queers in Palestine.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, like people are literally choosing I mean, even the breakdown of the family, you know, I don't want to channel my inner Charlie Kirk, but the breakdown of the family. If you believe a man can be a woman and give birth, everything's out the window.
Everything's out the window. Yeah.
Right. And it's weird that to challenge God or to get God out of the picture, they destroyed biology. Somehow, like by destroying science, they got God at. It's like the weirdest thing because we've always been told that religion and science were at odds, and actually that's what they did. Well, if we can get people to believe that they can defy biological reality, scientific reality, well then just don't God, right? I mean, you know, so it's just but that's a self-destructive policy, right? Because then you're not having babies anymore, and you're not having families anymore, and you got kids, you know, doing, you know, drugs stuff. And all this horrible stuff. Yeah, it's bizarre. I don't know, man. Maybe this is how the Roman Empire ended. Maybe, you know, I don't know. I don't know where it goes, and I don't know how to fight it. And anything we would do to try and fight the propaganda online. Like Trump wanted to ban TikTok, and I've written a million articles on. Like I said, I worked in a China government think tank, and I produced 2 sets of reports. I produced one for China and one for our side, and for 7 years, and then had to leave quickly. And
real quick, huh?
real quick. And one of the things is that they do understand our freedoms and they exploit them. And like Trump wanted to ban TikTok, and in the first administration, I was writing a lot of articles and policy recommendations about TikTok and things. I was saying, this is why it's dangerous. This is why this is how the Chinese are using it. This is what the Chinese are doing. I'm not sure that we should ban it because, number one, it's whack-a-mole. You're banning one, and then there's going to be another one. And number two, it's a restriction of our freedoms of speech, which we're supposed to have, and which I strongly believe in. So then we get down to, well, does that mean would I defend propaganda? And I almost have to say yes, because we lived in America for 4 years where speaking the truth was called propaganda.
Right.
I got my account shut down for reposting peer-reviewed articles in medical journals that said masks don't work.
Oh, trust me, bro. I got hammered for that. But you know what? The more I think about it is this. When in warfare, it makes you attack the strength of your opponent. So if our Constitution is our strength, you put us with our back against the walls when you make conflicts of the Constitution, to where it's almost like you're trying to break it, and you put pressure on it to snap it, and it's going to force your opponent to make mistakes. For example, Hamas walking down the street with all the flags. I call it Dagon, their old guy walking down the street. Dagon marching down the street during the Democratic National Committee where they had their big forum. You can't stop them from marching down the street because it's against the Constitution. So you weaponize the Constitution against the American people. And it's a very dastardly attack but if I'm the opponent, that's what I would attack. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because every decision is critical. So if you ban TikTok, then you open the door to banning anything else. If you don't ban TikTok, then you let us have our own way. And I've said this. I personally said this is one of those attacks that God has to lead and guide the nation through, because it's too perfect. I mean, it really is too perfect. No matter how well educated a person is on warfare, on psychological operations, this seems like it's almost demonic in its scale. So, for example, you said you take the family and separate the family. It's not just that. You, in the process of separating man and woman, then you take man and say he can be woman. Then you add spiritual curses on top of that, and then you send that into the future generations of families in a nation. It's dastardly and demonic at its core. And I think God is the only one that can help this nation with such a thing.
I totally agree with that.
I just don't see a way out of it.
I totally agree with that. And it's funny. One of my nieces, the part of my family, they're Christian, but they're not very much practicing, but they are absolutely Christian. And but they said, you know what, because we grew up Catholic and I'm Catholic, but they're like, I don't know that I want the kids to feel that they have to be Catholic, and so I want to kind of give them some freedom to figure out what they want to be. And my niece, and she's an adult now, and she came to me and she goes, I wish my dad had just forced me to be Catholic or Lutheran, or it didn't matter, but if he just forced me from birth, she goes, I wouldn't have to deal with this decision. It's because it's like one more decision that you have to deal with. And then add to that, I got to decide if I'm a boy or a girl.
Right.
My niece didn't, because she's not that generation, but this new generation. Could you imagine all the things you went through as a teenager? And on top of that, somebody saying to you, maybe you're a girl. Like, what?
That's crazy. That's oh my God, that's crazy.
And you know what you're not going to do? You're not going to do math.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not going to do math. No. You're not going to get
using up all your bandwidth,
Yeah.
Why aren't the kids going into STEM? Because they're too tired thinking about what math, what sex they are.
Yeah. If you can break the human mind to the point to where it just can't grasp the reality of what it is, like literally when you look at a mirror, you can control anything. I mean, you can control every decision that they make. And my question is, do you think that came out of China? that type of attack, where do you think those type of attacks come from? Like, I know they come from a spirit realm, from Satan himself. He's like, yeah, I'm Satan and I'm gonna attack these people. But like the physical manifestation, do you think that comes out of a nation like China? Do you think it comes out of Russia? Do you think it comes out of the actual think tanks that are all over the world? It probably comes out of the think tanks, because real smart guys in those think tanks. Or maybe it's a combination. What do you think?
I think it's a combination. But if you look at communist, so I had to study like Cambodian communism and Chinese communism and Russian communism and compare these systems. And then I worked in Russia and I'm sorry, not in Russia, but in China and Cambodia as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at how the communist how the revolutions happen, right? It's one of the first things. You have to destroy the religion because you don't want anything bigger than the party. You only want the people to believe in the party. There's nothing bigger than the party. You have to destroy religion. You have to destroy the family because there has to be no support network other than the state. There has to be nothing that you have allegiance to other than the state. And so all the steps that are happening in the U.S. are the same steps that happen there. Now, does that mean that China and Russia are pulling the strings? Probably on some level, but on some level, I think it's some kind of, like I said, it's like a Darwinism. Like when you reach a point that you don't have any problems, you create problems. Like America is so rich and people are so much better off than there. It is just, even when I went to college in Germany, right? And then I was in West Germany, and that's the richest part of Europe. The average person had 2 pair of shoes.
Right.
They had 2 jeans, one they're wearing and one that's in the laundry. There was nothing like we have. I remember people saying to me, Antonio, I'm learning English. What is an attic? I go, it's a room at the top of your house where you keep stuff you don't need. Oh, well, what's a basement? I go, oh, that's a room under your house where you keep stuff you don't need. They go, what's a garage? I go, it's a room where you're supposed to keep your car, but actually you just keep stuff you don't need. What's an unattached shed? Oh, it's a place where what's the storage? The storage facility. Like, oh, it's the thing where you pay every month to put things in. Like they don't have these. They're like, wouldn't you put both your jeans in your closet?
Wow.
Yeah.
And the average American citizen does not realize that. They don't realize it. I remember I went out to dinner. That was 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. I went out to dinner. We're having this conversation, and it's guys that I played golf with periodically because they're extreme hardcore black leftists. And we're talking, and the dude says, yeah, man, I'm so tired of this racism in America because, they doing this. I said, homie, you are a judge. I said, you sit on the bench as a judge. I said, would you please spare me the psychological bullcrap when I'm trying to have my dinner? And I'm like the only guy that'll sit there and speak up, right? And you're like, James, you crazy. No, man, you are a judge. You sit in a position of power. I mean, you rule with power. What are you talking about? If we was in such a racist nation, you wouldn't even have the opportunity to be a judge. And I think the problem is so many people haven't traveled the world at all. They haven't seen what goes on in the world. They haven't encountered people from around the world that it's hard for them to comprehend that. And I remember as a young black liberal, the only thing that broke me out of that was working for the United States Space and Strategic Defense Command and working with a Russian engineer and him just talking. And he'd be like, yeah, you have it good. You think you know that? Like, man, what are you talking about? You don't know what poverty is. And he just started talking. I was like, well, what do you mean soup made of what? He's like, yeah, that's poverty. And he just kept on talking. And at first I was offended. Imagine being in an underground bunker with a Russian guy who drinks all the time, that defected from Russia and who's breaking down missiles. And he's like, yeah, and he just talking about all the crap. And I was like, that's not true. But there was really no internet where you can Google it back then. You had to go get books and read it. So I had to go find a book, come back. Man, what you said is true. Yes, what I'm saying is true. Like, this is crazy. And I just like, all right, no matter what happens, I was blessed to be born in America. You know what I'm saying? And I got to make the best out of the opportunity I got. So I raised my kids to believe, hey, bro, you could have been born in Zimbabwe or something, bro. You was born in America. You need to get some money. You need to get some prosperity. You need to do some things. And I think because the average American citizen doesn't see the world, they don't get that. I can understand how you can get there, but we got to find a way to show people the reality of the world.
Well, first of all, one thing I always tell people is hundreds of people were killed trying to escape from East Germany.
Mm-hmm.
No one was ever killed trying to break in.
Right.
Same thing with Cuba, same thing with Vietnam, same thing, And yeah, man, I worked in East Germany, and it was so poor. First of all, of course, they didn't have phones in their homes, but they didn't even have payphones.
Wow.
There would be like a limited number of payphones, and everybody would just like walk however far, to a payphone. But you didn't have, because who are you going to call, right? Nobody else had a phone either. And I was working in a company, and they told me I had to go to the 8th floor. I'm like, well, where's the elevator? And they pointed at this shaft. It was an open shaft, and you can Google this when we get off because you're not going to believe me. It's called the Paternoster. Yeah, it's called the Paternoster elevator. It's like a, what do you call it in English? A conveyor belt.
Mm-hmm.
Vertical, with little bits of wood on it, and you jump onto a bit of wood, and you ride it up, and you jump off when you get to your floor. And it has no doors, so on every floor, the elevator shaft is just open, and you ride on this thing, and you jump off. And I remembered every time I did it, I'm like, what happens if I chicken out and I don't jump off? Like,
over the top. When you get to the curve, you're dead, bro.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just how people lived. And the other thing was, after the reunification of Germany, the East Germany, they wound up with like, I don't know, 28%, 30, 40% unemployment rate initially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, wait a minute. They had 100% employment under communism, but they wound up with 40% unemployment when they ended the communism. What does that tell you? Were these productive workers that were producing something that was worth? No, it was costing more to employ them than what they were producing. So now what you're telling me is 40% of your population was unproductive.
Right.
What does that make you? It makes you poor, right? Because I was thinking about everything in economic terms, but you got 40, think about that. 40% of the people don't work, or 40% of the people have a job that's like a stupid job that doesn't produce anything, which now go to America.
Same thing's happening.
You talk to young people under the age of 25. What do you want to be? Number one job, they want to be content creators. Oh, no insult to you. They want to be content creators, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we need engineers.
Mm-hmm.
We need people building stuff, producing stuff, right? And I mean, communism is just nuts, man. When I worked in Cambodia, I mean, it is so poor. I mean, you're talking generationally poor because of communism. And I don't mean that as an insult, because I love Cambodia. I love Cambodian people. I'm happy that things are getting better. They're much better now than when I was first working there 25 years ago. But it's just so sad that, let's say in 2004, when I was working in Cambodia, 2003, the first time, they were living poor. I mean, America, you'd have to go back to maybe 1860s
to be that poor. Wow.
You had maybe 15% of the population had a wage-paying job. I remember that. I remember a statistic like that. It was less than 20% had a wage-paying job. The last province had just been convinced to start using money.
Wow.
There's one province that held out. They're like, no, we're not going to use money. We don't understand it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
communism, man.
That's communism. But I think some of the solutions to it, you have to fight the cultural shifts, right? So if we can get, as American citizens, if we can force the propaganda mechanisms, which is things like Hollywood movies and all those other things, to start brainwashing people in the right direction. Because I just come to the conclusion that there's the population's minds are malleable. It's just a matter of who's going to mold those minds. There's just no way around it. Like,
that's right.
Like you said, there's some Darwinism going on, and you're going to have to mold it. You brought up an important point. Like, there's a significant portion of the generation that want to be content creators, conservative. I don't have to say anything. They're hardcore conservative.
You're not going to find a liberal carrying bricks. You're not going to find a liberal carrying. You're not even going to find a liberal supervising people who carry bricks.
Right. And so the issue is that percentage of the liberal people, they've been programmed to be that hardcore liberal. We just got to find a way to unprogram them. And I know I think the Smith-Mine Act was what allowed them to actually be propagandized like that. And everybody's like, well, Donald Trump needs to put it back in place. I don't think he needs to put that act back in place. I think he needs to take control of those mechanisms and reverse the brainwashing. Because if you don't reverse the brainwashing, then the propaganda steadily coming out and hitting them. We just have to reverse it. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, I think one thing we could do is play their game against them, which is we could incentivize the making of patriotic movies and TV shows and stuff, right? Through grants and making money available. Think about this. If you want to write an article about there's a climate crisis and we're all going to die tomorrow, right? You want to write a scientific paper on that. There's a million places you can write to get funding. There's people that'll publish, your research, right? If you want to, if you could all those sources of funding and you go, listen, I want to explore why climate crisis is nonsense, and I'm going to prove that it doesn't exist. They're not giving you any money, and if you write the paper, it's not getting published. And then I also love the circular logic, which is, well, it wasn't published because those guys are quacks. Why are they quacks? Well, they don't believe in climate crisis, right? Well, what's right? Well, because no papers have been published, right? But you refusing to publish paper, yeah, because they're quacks, But anyway, the point is, right? So you could be offering money to make patriotic, and that's why like Angel Film Studio is one that I really like, and
I love those guys.
Yeah. You know what? I love those guys. I forgot who made The Chosen, but like I love The Chosen, and I would do anything for those. If they called me and they're like, come work for us for free or something, like I would just do it in a heartbeat because I just believe in what they're doing. Mel Gibson, that's another interesting. James, have you had this experience though that like people that you used to be lukewarm on 5 years ago suddenly like they're your biggest heroes?
Right. It's like you've been forced to make a choice.
Yeah.
It really, people have been, and that's the scariest thing about it. Like people have been forced to decide, okay, it's like everything has been put in your face. You can't deny it, right? My dad talks about this. He was like, yeah, I've been a Democrat my whole life, son. I said, yep. I said, that's been a problem for us. He started laughing. He said, well, when they start telling me that my great grandson needs to put on a dress, then, I can't go with that. I said, yes, sir, I understand. He said, no, son, you're not listening. I can't go with that at all. He was like, when they come knocking on my door, I won't pull my gun on them. I was like, all right, Pops. And he was like, no, I'm just keeping it real with you. Like, I can't go with that at all. Why is my camera doing like that? Quit it, camera. And I understand where he's coming from because it's gotten to the point to where you have to make a decision. It's like the good and evil is in your face so bad that you have to make a decision. You can't go around it. Can't hide from it. Can't do anything. And I think the more that decision-making process is forced upon people through what you say, hijacking the mechanisms, they get to choose. And then for once you make your choice, man, everything is open to you. Everything is available. You see everything. Like I love Mel Gibson, the fact that he came out. What's the guy who played in his movie, the guy who played Jesus Christ in The Passion of Christ?
Oh, that's Jim Caviezel.
Love Jim Caviezel. Like, and you notice,
and
like
Jonathan
we had,
Rumi.
He's amazing. Then we had the movies come out about
Mark Wahlberg. I'm telling you, man, Mark Wahlberg, Mel Gibson. I had a mediocre, vague opinions on them before COVID, and especially Mark Wahlberg used to make fun of him, And now they're my heroes. Mark Wahlberg every Sunday he posts. Stands in front of the church, does sign across, says, "Happy Sunday, everybody, stay prayed up." Every Sunday, he's got the Hallow app. They're praying. You got Mel Gibson, you got Jim Caviezel, Jonathan Rumi. And he's really quick to tell people, "Look, I'm not Jesus, but I want to pray with you." Like,
right.
It's just
that's
amazing.
where we are, though. That's where we are. I'll tell you. I did a stint where I studied the strange paranormal things. If you look me up, you'll find like I've done interviews everywhere on that. The one thing
my friends were looking you up today, and they were like, "We're trying to figure out where this guy is on the."
Well, it's hard to figure out because I was sent into that field to go learn a lesson. I realized God sent me into that field to learn a lesson, and the lesson that I pulled from it is, see, there's a unique nature of darkness, and that nature of darkness is really it's simple, but it's unique. It's all about blinding, and as long as people are blinded to the truth, then you can manipulate them in any way, shape, or form. I mean, you really, really can. Now, the process of eye opening is truly the process of decision making. And I think that we have to force people towards decision making. Like, that's the unique thing about all my shows and all my podcasts and everything I've ever done. Even when I was dealing in that field, I was always forcing them to make a decision, because I would just frame the conversation as either you're going to believe this or you're not going to believe it. If
Right,
you don't
right, right.
believe it, no matter what, this is what the result is in your life. So if you sit there at night and you listen to scary stuff in the night going to bed, guess what's going to happen to you? You're going to have problems for the next day, and you're probably going to have problems sleeping. And it's your fault, because you decided you want to listen to all this spooky, scary stuff because you think it's not real. You think that realm doesn't exist. And
Oh man,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, man. I got to comment on that.
Go ahead.
Got to tell you something. I'm an educated person, PhD, American, 20th century, and I'm living over here,
Hmm.
in Thailand, Burma, working in the jungle, and they believe in the evil spirits, and they really believe in it, and it causes them to change their behavior. Like, they won't plow the field, or they won't do this, they won't do that because of spirits, right? So there's an older missionary here, named Pastor Eubank, and I respect this guy so much. He did his original mission trips over here on an elephant, ministering to the headhunters, trying to get them to
Whoa.
convert to Christianity. And his son is David Eubank, who founded Free Burma Rangers.
Okay.
So if you could look them up after. And anyway, he said to me one time, we're talking about evil spirits, and they have these spirit houses in front of all the villages and things, and the spirit house, so your spirits of all the dead ants are living there, right?
Hmm.
Inside the spirit house. So he said to me, he goes, yeah, when people convert to Christianity, we have to destroy the spirit house.
Hmm.
And he goes, we have to burn it. And he goes, but we won't do it in the village because people go crazy. So we remove it, and we have a whole ceremony. We remove it and we take it away and like burn it in private. And he said to me, he goes, I said something like, yeah, it's silly. They believe in evil spirits. He goes, what are you talking about? He goes, it's all over the Bible.
Hmm.
They are
Everywhere.
real. It's real. He goes, it is real. He goes, but it doesn't affect you generally because you're a Christian and they really have no authority over you. Um, but it's real. And then once he told me that, and I started understanding. So I go in this one village one time, and they were richer than most villages that I've been in. Like, usually, so again, like I'm an economist. There's certain things I look for. I go in a village and I go, are the houses made of bamboo, or are they made of like milled lumber? Right? If it's milled lumber, it's a richer village. Do they have? Is there anything made of stone? Do they have concrete? Do they have any running water? Even if it's outside the house, that's still richer. And this village was like the richest village I'd been to, and as far as like a village. And I go, wow, this is amazing. And they go, yeah. And they took me to their church, and they're like, oh, we're Christians now, we didn't used to be Christians. And I go, were you always rich like this? I said, no, we got rich after we became Christians. And I said, why do you think that is? He goes, well, there were evil spirits in those fields over there, and we were afraid to plow them.
Hmm.
And the missionaries came and they helped us exorcise the spirits, and we started plowing those fields, and it like doubled or whatever, tripled their agricultural output, right? And then they all got wealthy. The kids all go to school. Like it was like just the nicest, most idyllic, place. And they live in this beautiful, in the middle of the jungle. It's so beautiful. But it was because they exercised those spirits. But it was real. They were telling me, they're like, no, people would get sick and people would die, and the animals would die, or if we planted, the plants would die. And it is real. It is real. And it took me being in the jungle to understand it's real in New York City too.
Yeah. Well, when you go into the jungles, that's where you're dealing with territorial spirits, and those territorial spirits have been ruling and reigning for generations. And then when you service them by making sacrifices, making prayers, they're their gods. They're little g gods. And that's
Yeah.
another thing. Just that, I don't want to take the conversation to some place spooky ooky, but that's one of the biggest problems that we have in this nation of America, is that people are not aware of the fact that they're serving little g gods, right? So, for example,
Right.
but you see the manifestation. I don't know the last time you've been stateside, but if you come stateside, you'll see that every young lady now has a bull ring in her nose, and they run
Yep.
around with these little metal rings in their nose. They don't understand that's a manifestation of the spirit of the age that they're living in. Like my favorite coffee shop, beautiful girl. I mean, she's probably 6'2", the most gorgeous young lady there is. We always talk. And she's like, I like how you treat your wife. You're so nice, blah, 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 blah. And she says, Mr. James, I have a problem. I said, sure, sweetheart. I said, I wish I had a daughter like you. Lord only gave me sons. So we sit down. She said, I have a problem. I said, what's the problem? She said, well, my boyfriend has been acting real weird and strange with me. And I said, well, can I be honest with you? And she says, yes. I said, no, this is going to hurt your feelings. I said, but I'm going to be real honest with you. I said, you're not going to find the boyfriend that you're supposed to have, because the man that God has for you is in a different culture. The culture that you're in with this bull ring in your nose. And she kind of looks. I said, I told you you're going to get mad. I said, but this is what you got to understand. Somebody's got to tell you the truth. You're in a different culture. In that culture, the men are going to behave this way.
Yep.
I said, when you decide to take the ring out your nose, and I said, you decide to go back to the religion of your parents and your grandparents. She says, well, how do you know that? I said, your grandmother was a Christian that prayed. This is the reason why you was born. How the fuck do you know all that? I said, because God is telling me, right? I said, so when you go back to where you're supposed to be, I said, there's a husband waiting on you. I said, now you can sit here and mess around with all these little boys with these rings. And I said, this is going to break your heart. But we miss this. This is the aspect of what's been lost culturally in our nation. A part of the with this propaganda war is the spiritual aspect of life. And so nobody's teaching their kids that you have to pray, that prayer works, that going to church is important, that actually that the more you go to church, the older you are in the kingdom of God. Nobody told you that. Nobody teaches that. So as we steer away from where we originated from, no matter who you are, no matter what race you are when you were born in this nation, we start to crumble. That's why I feel like, well, I know what was on the ballot during the last election was made obvious when, remember the guy went to Kamala Harris's campaign?
Jesus is Lord.
And he was like, Jesus Christ is Lord. And she said, you're at the wrong rally. I said, oh my Lord, lady. I said, you don't even understand. You just put Jesus on the ballot. You lost. I don't care what nobody say. You lost. But that was the realm of the spirit saying, hey, I'm here and this is a spiritual battle. This is war in the spirit realm, but nobody sees it. And when I talk about it, people look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, no, this is clear. It's right there. And so,
man, I've had priests tell me that they believe that during COVID, because things were just so horrible, they believed that like evil spirits just like proliferated, during that time, and that's why things were just so horrible. And it took coming out of the lockdowns and people going back to church, and there's this weird religious movement going on in the state. I mean, weird in the sense that this is very difficult to quantify as an economist, right? But people who are religious are becoming more religious. That is, a lot of people believe this. I think it's very difficult to prove, but it seems to be anecdotally the case. And a lot of people are not only going to church or converting to Christianity, but very interestingly, a lot of them are moving towards either Catholic or towards Orthodox. And I think a lot of that is pushback against like the wokeness that's going on in, some of the other, because this thing, if you have a church that's got a rainbow flag and you can do whatever the heck you want and listen to music, might as well go, right? Like,
well, what you're looking at is a revival. It's just the revival is manifesting. It's happening everywhere. You see it in Catholic, Orthodox, Roman Catholic. The place that scares me is the traditional Latin masses. They're fighting that hardcore because that's the demon casting out masses in the Catholic religion. That's the one that they're really fighting, because that's how you know it's warfare. But nonetheless, you're seeing it all over the place. If you really pay attention,
I wonder if like tent revivals in the South are taking off.
They're getting ready to start taking off. It's not like tents. It's these massive conferences. But we've had in the South, we've had like, because we've been lacking leadership in the church, we've had like the biggest apostolic pastors from Africa come into America.
That's the amazing thing is the Africans and the Filipinos and Indians, Christians that are coming, like, because I'm all over the world, and I go to church and like, wow, there's a priest from India, there's a guy from Africa, there's a Filipino. Amazing what these guys are doing for the world.
Because you know what it used to be like, and you can verify I'm right on this. So the founding fathers dedicated this nation to the God of heaven, which will be the God of the Bible, right? And America used to export that religious faith from its institutions and universities, right? And then we get captured. And when you look at what we export now, it's perversion and LGBTQ and all the rest of this. So that's why you see this war for the college universities again, because that's where we exported things out that made us prosperous, right? So we can't export it. So we have people now importing it into America. which they're importing the Christian faith into America, but it's a different brand of it. It's more of like the Church of the Book of Acts that's being imported into the nation, so it can be exported out. So it's going to be imported in. It's going to sit. It's going to manufacture here in the spirit room. Imagine like a factory, and and then pew, 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 pew.
The Book of Acts. I like that, man. I like that. I like that. I'm gonna steal that, by the way.
And that's bro. That's what I see happening. And I can honestly tell you that because there's many days I've sitting there like, Lord, what you want me to do today? Well, I want you to go find this person, interview that person, talk to this person, talk to this person. Like, I don't know none of them people. Do it. Now go do it, and then boom, 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 boom.
I gotta ask you a question. Given my accent, can you figure out where I'm from?
No, I can't.
Okay, so most people think New York, which I grew up about half my life in New York.
I wouldn't say New York at all.
Yeah, I grew up in Appalachia. Well, also my accent changes when I'm talking to you, but I grew up in Appalachia for like most of my formative years.
What? Really? No, I would have never guessed that.
Yep. And we didn't have a Catholic church, so I went to Baptist church. I went to 3 times a week: Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night.
Right.
So that's how I grew up.
You went to Bible study on Wednesday night.
Yep.
You went to Bible study on Wednesday night.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, man, I resented that because they'd be like, nope, you got to go to church on Sunday. We went to church
twice
on Sunday.
Twice on Sunday.
Yeah, you went to church early Sunday morning, then you went to Bible school on Sunday morning, then church on Sunday, then Wednesday. Like, man, I spend more time in church than anywhere. But it gives you a foundation as you get older and challenges come. You can be like, hold on. And you may not even know it all. It's not like it doesn't set in until challenges hit you as an adult. Then you're like, whoa. Then when you go back to the Bible, at least you know what book to open to read. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man.
I can only imagine a person who's going through troubles and they don't know the story of Job, so they don't know to read the story of Job because they never been introduced to anything. You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
do you remember when Joe Biden wanted to show how Christian he was, and he went on TV and he goes, "I'm going to read a story from the book of Psalms. It's in the Old or New Testament. I'm not sure which." He really said that. I don't know which. Psalms number 23.
Oh, I didn't hear that. That's hilarious. But I can see Joe doing that.
I really believed him that he was Christian. No, I didn't.
I'm Joe Biden.
I watched the movie the other day.
Psalms 23.
I watched the movie the other day, the original Sergeant York movie. I was thinking of my dad. You know, my dad made me watch that when I was a boy, and growing up in Tennessee. Of course, he's from Tennessee, Sergeant York, and you know the church revival and the songs and everything that, you know, grew up with in the Baptist church down there, and just made me really feel good and, you know, miss my home and all that. But it was not a bad way to grow up.
No,
it was not a bad way to grow up.
It's not, compared to how these kids are coming up now.
Yeah,
I couldn't imagine. And I'm gonna say this. People don't like when I say this. There's two things. The number one thing that destroyed culture in America was the anti-bullying movement. I'm sorry when nobody says because I sit on the board for a couple of nonprofits, and we will go into schools, and I never forget, I'm sitting with principals, and they'd be like, well, you know, we got funds for anti-bullying. I was like, you don't need to take those funds. What do you mean? There are kids getting beat up. I said, let them get beat up, and let us teach them martial arts.
That's what happened, man. I was a headmaster. I was a headmaster of a high school, and I immediately put in a wrestling program. Day-one wrestling. And actually, my number one student was the one that was getting bullied.
Yeah, that's it. That's all you need. That's all you need. Don't stop the bullying because it's a rite of passage. Just to teach them how to defend themselves. And so now we see this generation of kids who came up where they can't be bullied, because bullying serves a purpose. If you come to school saying you're a boy and you're a girl, or you're a girl and you're a boy, you're going to get bullied and set straight. So somebody go say, hey, man, what the hell wrong with you? Stop acting like you're stupid, man. What's wrong with you? You know, so you're going to get set straight. There's a purpose for bullying. But when you pull it out, then everybody just walks around and does, I can do anything, because there's no threat to anything happening to them. And so there's no pushback at all. And they're protected, and now they have their safe space. And then the safe spaces took over college campuses. And now the safe spaces led to them basically running psychological operations in China, taking over.
And what's ironic about all this, and that's part of PSYOP. So if you study PSYOP, so one of the things is that you invent a vocabulary. So one of the things we had to study a lot, we had to study cults a lot and understand how cults work. And that's one of the first things. You create a vocabulary so that, one, when you use that vocabulary, you're signaling that you're part of that cult. So, and people bond over the vocabulary, and outsiders can't challenge your beliefs because they don't know the vocabulary, and you just laugh at them, mock at them. And this is happening now on a societal level. And you have all these words. We have safe space. We have, I don't know what else, you know, triggered.
You got zim, zays, he, she's, him, hers. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Even words like global warming. I wrote an article. So this is, I have to review the U.S. Arctic strategy. It's the U.S., China, and Russia all have Arctic strategies, right? So I have to review them. And for, you know, the military strategy. So one of the points about the Arctic strategy is that the reason why Trump wants to buy Greenland, and I've written many policy papers on this, that we should buy Greenland. And one of the reasons why is because global warming has caused the Northern Passage to open. It was not open before. You could not sail from Russia up above, you know, Greenland and that. You can now. This is real. Now, I don't believe in a climate crisis at all. And I hate climate anything, and I don't want to see money put into it. And I just think that things change and it's normal, but it is definitely changing, and definitely that ice has melted. I got crucified at the Gateway Pundit. Readers were like, he put the word climate change in there.
Right.
I stopped reading when I saw the word climate. I'm like, dude, these passages are open now. They were not open before. I have the proof. I can show you the report from 50 years ago when it wasn't open. And no need to defend that because you can't get a ship through it. Now it's like, oh yeah, ships go through there all the time, you know.
So, well, that's because they've stolen the term and defined it. So climate change means that spending money. The climate is always freaking changing.
Means spending money.
And in everybody's mind. That's what it means. Climate change means spending money on. When you say climate change, the first thing you visualize is Bill Gates, right? And so it's a negative connotation to the term. But it's the truth. The reality is the climate's always changing because the climate is controlled by the sun, which is always changing. And they know that. It's just the propaganda, and it's actually a positive thing because it just shows you the visceral reaction to the term climate change. It's just you can't use it, so you got to come up with a different term.
You know why? You know why nobody lives in like that part of Alaska or that part of Canada? Because you couldn't get there.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and it was no way to do like shipping and trade and whatever. So what's going to happen now? So that's opening up. It's just going to make everybody richer. It's going to be better. There is no crisis, but there's definitely change. Definitely climate change.
Definitely change.
And I was stationed in Mongolia for 4 years. And every time it was like minus 40. I'm like, do you realize if it wasn't for global warming, it would be minus 41?
Oh my goodness.
This is a crisis.
It's a crisis. Unlike anything I've ever seen. Man, how was your time in Mongolia? That had to be beautiful.
I love Mongolia. I love it. It's my favorite country. I mean, I'm probably going to die in Burma, but
wow.
Yeah, but Mongolia was my favorite country. It's I wrestle, you know, and wrestling is just such a huge part of my life. And being in Mongolia was amazing. And the herders, man, American cowboys, like for America, the cowboy is like the guy who's got the freedom, the alpha male and the freedom.
Right.
And the difference between a Mongolian herder and a cowboy is that a cowboy is an employee.
Wow.
People forget that. He didn't own those cows.
Right.
Right. He worked someone driving somebody else's cows.
Right.
Herder owns his own sheep. Like he's completely independent. You get nothing on him. And he's out there, you know, when winter starts, like the end of September, you know, like when the first snowfall comes on September 20th, you know, you make a decision, am I in or out? And they're going to stay out. And they decide to stay out there for the whole winter and take care of their sheep. And
man, that's wild.
These are alpha males on a scale like you can't imagine. Like
you know, just to deal with that type of weather, man. And you tougher than yeah.
And they only have one source of entertainment is wrestling.
Wow.
That's it.
Yeah.
They herd the sheep all day, and then this herder sees the other herder over there, so they go over and they meet. And how do they interact? They wrestle. And so you just got these people and they eat nothing but meat and milk because they only eat the things that come from the animals. They can't grow vegetables. There's no chickens because you can't herd chickens. They don't grow vegetables. They don't grow fruit. They just eat meat and milk, and they wrestle all the time and ride horses all day. So they're just Their lung capacity is 4 times that of a normal person.
I could imagine dropping one of those guys into the modern world and them looking around and be like, what the hell is all this crap going on? You know, they would probably be like, what is all this crap? What is wrong with you people? Send me back out into the fields. You know what I'm saying?
I always joke with my friends. I'm like, do you find it weird that you wake up in the same place every day when you live in the same? Like, wait a minute, we're in the same place.
That's crazy. Yeah. All right, brother, we're running up on an hour. I'm not going to take much more of your time. Man, it's been a great conversation. I knew it was going to be a phenomenal conversation. We hit on some geopolitical things, but like I said, the most important thing is I think we need to be able to relate to each other and then share the commonalities of life and the things that we all have in common. And from a Christian conservative perspective, the more we do it, we become kind of like a virus. And then we'll reach the demonic leftist firewall as we spread. But when you hit the firewall and they realize, wait, these guys are way cooler than we are, they're going to want to come over. You know, that's the biggest thing. And why is my camera doing it? It's been acting crazy.
See, I blame CGI. I blame CGI in video games a lot, because one of the reasons we wanted to be big and strong and masculine growing up is because that's what we saw in the movies. Mm-hmm. And those heroes could do things we couldn't. Do you remember Rambo 1? He didn't even have a gun. He took out a helicopter with a rock.
Yep. Sure did. He sure did. And then video games got to the point where everybody's a nerdy looking superhero. And
everyone could do it. And that's the thing. I remember a friend of mine, they wanted me to teach their kid martial arts, and I started teaching him, and like, he kind of didn't like it. And I go, why? I go, you play those video games where you're fighting and stuff. Now you could do it for real. But like, mm-hmm. He actually didn't make. Yeah, the kids don't make the connection between what they're doing in the video game and what they're going to do in the real world. Mm-hmm. Whereas we'd watch TV and they go, oh, I'm going to go out on the street and act like that, and usually get beat up as a result, right?
Oh no, I will watch something like Karate Kid, go outside and pick a fight and get beat up immediately.
Exactly. Whereas today they're like, they don't. They're losing their connection to the real world, and it's really, 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 really scary. I mean, on the positive side, though, most of the rest of the world, except for Europe and Australia, but like Asia, Africa, probably Latin America, people are conservative in the sense like they're against abortion. You know, mm-hmm. they don't want abortion. In most of Asia here, like Burma, like we're in the middle of a war. Like if I said to somebody how many genders are there, like, what are you, insane?
Right.
You know. So
that's another disadvantage of always having peace on the forefront on the shores of America, honestly, is you get to focus on stupidity. That's the scary. I'm gonna tell you, that's the scariest thing for me right now, based from a spiritual standpoint. Like, if you ever read the Bible and you really study the God of the Bible, which is the God of this nation, see, when a nation starts to not do right, he brings enemies in to surround them. And then it's kind of like, okay, your enemy surrounds you and he warns you. Then the next thing is, okay, you still ain't doing right. Then he tries to put a woman over you. And so we just went through the phase where we rejected the woman being over us, but that doesn't mean we're safe. And we got enemies that are just staged inside of America right now. I don't care what anybody says. They're sitting here waiting. And I believe the only thing that's holding them back is him. And I think if certain populations in America, if they don't wake up, they're going to see more and more of these kind of terrorist style attacks, not really realizing that, no, you've been rejecting everything that makes sense. And so it makes sense that the last one was in Boulder, Colorado, right? It is going to be places where they invite this foolishness in because it's their belief system. And it's just pow, it's going to be one after the next. Pow, 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 pow. And it's a lesson trying to be taught to them. And then if it doesn't get through to them, then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Once you get into real war, you don't have time to talk about whose PP goes where and all the rest of that. You don't have time to worry about that.
Yeah, we have a joke about that in Burma too, which is like everybody that's over there as a volunteer that's working in the war zone, first of all, almost 100% of them are Christian, almost 100%. And maybe 70% are military veterans and about 30% are like second generation missionaries.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of military veterans that are like second generation missionaries, but it's really funny. We always joke about that. We're like, we don't see anybody with a bone in their nose. I mean, whatever, like a piercing or something
Right.
like
You're not
that.
gonna
Like,
find it.
you don't see that. They're not going to go run into a war zone to try and bring, food or humanitarian aid, or, they're not going to do it.
No, they're not. And until that war comes home to them,
Yeah.
then they'll understand it. The danger of it is this war that they've invited to the shores of America is it's a mixture. It's like wokeism with a little bit of radical Islam hidden underneath the flag of Free Palestine. It's like this triple-headed Hydra monster that's just sitting there lording over them, over every blue city. Like, yep, I'm waiting to attack, and they don't see it. They really
Right.
don't see it. It's like,
How
it's
do
the
you
perfect.
not? I mean, how do you not like? Well, and they just ignore. Like, they will argue with you. No, crime has not gone up. No, Chicago is not unsafe. No, New York didn't become unsafe. Like, what?
That's what I'm saying. And then it's worse than that. That not only will they argue with you on it, they'll go to the place and then tempt fate and go to like downtown Chicago. A good friend of mine, billionaire, right? He lives in Chicago. I said, hey, Jim, you might want to get out of Chicago. Well, James, everything is fine in Chicago. I said, no, the hell it's not. It's not fine, man. I said, you're going to end up having a problem. Kept on staying. His wife goes downtown. His wife gets robbed, gets beat upside the head. He was like, well, it's really not that safe. No shit, Sherlock. I've been telling you that for 3 years. But
right.
the media that he consumes tells him it's safe. And I'm like, bro, I have family. My last name is Williams, right? The family, the real last name of the family is Franklin. My last name is Williams. But the Franklin family is all over America, right? I mean, and it's black Franklins, it's white Franklins, and we everywhere, right? And when you start reaching out to family, you're like, nah, bro, family in Chicago say we need to go here. We're getting out of there. And it's like, bro, you need to leave these areas.
Right.
But he doesn't, in his mind, and he's a white billionaire, in his mind, coming to the South and living like in a Tennessee or in a Texas, it's going to be racist. And I'm like, man, what is wrong with you? Like, how do you even think that? It's
so
crazy, bro.
Nuts. Dude, when I was, first of all, growing up in Tennessee, I mean, first of all, everybody was poor. I think there's something about everybody being poor that just kind of makes it like equal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's part of it. And then when I was in the military, and particularly I did some time with the Merchant Marines as well. And that's like guys who can't even get in the military.
Right.
So I used to crack up. I'm like, you got inner city, ethnic, and you got Appalachian, like it was like the lowest strata, and it was guys that had criminal convictions, so they couldn't be in the military, but they could be in the merchant marine. It was like the absolute lowest strata of humanity. Like, it worked. I mean,
and everybody got along, right? Yeah,
it did. I'm not going to say the day one wasn't perfect. Day one wasn't perfect, but I never heard of a ship sinking because the crew doesn't get along. It's like, just work it out, because they start finding out. They're like, wait a minute, I remember like you'd go in the military and like you got to go through all these medical checks and get inoculations and I remember in the Merchant Marines, because it was like just the poorest from the city and from the countryside, there were guys that had never had a shot. There were guys who had never had a vaccination of any kind. I remember you have to get your head shaved, right?
Mm-hmm.
There were literally guys who had never been to a barber.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, those are probably more the countryside guys rather than
That's
the
super country
inner
right
city,
there, bro.
But I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, everything was new. They were all baffled by everything, right? So at the end of the day, you go, okay, I'm black and everything baffles me. You're white and everything baffles you, and you're from Mexico or whatever, because they could, with a work permit, they could be there. So it's like at the end of the day, they start sharing their experiences. They're like, we grew up pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's in my opinion, man, that's the key to all of it. The key is making sure people do not know how similar they are. That's why social media is such a vicious trap, because on social media, you get a fraction of what a person says, a fraction of what they believe. You never really get to know the person. And as the attention spans are dumbed down, nobody listens.
Right.
They just don't listen. So, for example, a person may listen to the first 30 minutes of this interview with me and you and be like, oh, these guys just talking about politics. They don't realize by the end of the interview, we done talked about the whole gambit of everything there is, and then revealed very personal things that if you read into them, you'll understand a lot. But they don't get to that point. So then later on, they'd be like, "Oh, I saw that guy James Williams, and he's an asshole." You know what I'm saying? Be like, "Yeah, okay, bro, that's what I am if you say so." But that's the nature of where we are, because these devices are an interface that interfere with interpersonal relationships.
Right.
And
Oh my goodness. I see couples sitting at the table and they're both looking at their phones. They're not talking to each other. The other thing is the children. Okay, so being Italian, you sit at the table with the adults from always, like, even if it's, the party goes till midnight, you sit at the table with the adults. Like, there wasn't this thing of like the children eat different food, or they sit in the other room, or they watch, God forbid you watch TV. No, you're sitting there at the table with the adults, and you're learning by osmosis, because you're hearing what the adults, the crosstalk. And the kids today don't, because they sit with their phone or their iPad and they only engage when you talk to them. They are losing probably 70% of the education that we had, that we just got through. Just it sounds like you probably had a good relationship with your dad. I guess.
Yep.
Did you follow him around or do chores or go with him?
Everywhere.
I got to go to the bank. Come with me. And
I went to the bank.
Yeah. And even though you didn't know, you were learning this is a bank and you wait in line and this is how it works. You learn these things through osmosis, right?
Yep. And then for our family, it was the kids had a kids table, but you were always graduating from the kids table to the adult table. So there would always be the cousin who was just on the cusp of going to the adults table that would sit there with the kids, and it was a rite of passage. So he'd be like, I never forget my cousin, "I'm tired of sitting here with y'all little."
Wait, was his name Carmine? Because I got a cousin. No.
I'm telling you. And he'd be like, "I'm tired of sitting with y'all little bastards. I'm ready to go to the adult table." So when you got to the table, you paid attention, because it's like, what are they talking about? Then you get there, you're like, they ain't talking about nothing. They just but you still paying attention to every little thing. And like in my family, like, it was suit and tie dinners. It was straight up, because we old school Mississippi. Like, it was Sunday dinner, you had a suit and tie on.
Right.
You went to church Sunday at 8 o'clock in the morning. You took that suit and tie off, you put it back on to go to dinner, to sit down and eat. And so, and when you have those kind of traditions in families, when it was time for me to go get to work on a job as an engineer, I was the only engineer that wore a suit and tie every day. People are like, why do you wear a suit and tie? Well, that's how we're supposed to dress. Well, no, you could wear this. No. That's not professional. This is how a professional dresses. And people were confused by it, but that's how a professional on a job dresses. You know what I'm saying? And they just didn't get it. They still didn't get it, because they didn't have those rich family traditions. Now, the other side of his family has problems and mess and drama, but
so one of my friends stayed with my family one time, and after like 3-4 days, he goes, "This is so exhausting." It's like, you guys, one minute you're kissing and hugging, it's like the Cosby Family. Next minute you're like killing each other.
Yep. Next minute you're arguing and fighting. Yeah. So it's exhausting when you get to that point, but it's where you learn so many lessons. Like, my first time I was backstabbed by somebody was a family member. First time I saw somebody looking at my girlfriend crazy was a family member. I mean, why are you looking at my girlfriend like that, man? She's pretty. Stop it. You know what I'm saying? Family member. But it's where the lessons are learned.
Yeah, some people, I love that, though, about people taking what they need from life's lessons. But yeah, there's kids who grow up really scrappy, sports, outdoors, guns, whatever, because they want to go in the Army. And then they kind of like at 20, they go, you know what? I already know all that, and I'm going to go do this other thing. And it's wonderful, because it's like, okay, so they can tick that box, do something else.
It's a great thing. It's just that here in Louisiana, when you start training with those kind of guys in certain gun ranges you go to, certain training that you do, and they see them at that young age, people kind of watch them to see where they're going. You know what I'm saying? Because North Shore, Louisiana is super duper hardcore when it comes to military and military intelligence. I mean, it's crazy what's in Louisiana. You know that. Louisiana is crazy.
By the way, I'm very proud. I'm very proud today. My nephew just became commissioned as a Marine Corps officer 2 days ago.
Wow, congratulations, man. That's awesome.
And he's only the third in my family. He's the third generation born in this country. My nephew's the third generation born in this country, but fourth generation veteran, because my grandfather was not a citizen and he fought for the Americans World War I. My dad was Korean War And then I was in the military. My sister was in the military, and now my nephew's in the military. So, yeah, I'm super proud of that.
You know, that's one of the cultural things that I hate about black culture, man. I'm gonna be honest with you, is that culturally in the urban centers, our community has been so turned against the government that when it's time for war, you know, they just like, nah. Some of the best and brightest will not go into warfare. It's like you get some guys who are good, but you ain't getting the best and brightest at all. The best and brightest completely rejected. I remember when I worked for U.S. Space and Strategic Defense Command. You go in, and it's a civilian job working with the military. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, you know, this is kind of cool. You know, it's actually kind of fun. I didn't like the pay level and the pay scale. And it was like, well, it's a guaranteed job. And then I noticed something. I'm walking around, and there's very few like black servicemen there in this organization.
Mm.
So I started talking to one of the guys, and I was like, well, why is there not a lot of black people here? He was like, well, you know, we traditionally don't do this kind of stuff. It's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, we'll join the army, we'll join the military. It's normally like
Yeah.
some kind of second tier program, but it's not. Guy's name was Ricardo Parks. He says, well, James, we don't traditionally, purposely do this. So Ricardo's dad was a veteran, his grandfather was a veteran, and he was in Army ROTC and in engineering. And culturally, that's something that leads to, in my opinion, that leads to this ignorance of the blessings of America. Because culturally, we don't have enough veterans in that community. We need more. You know what I'm saying?
That's
we need a hell of
interesting.
a lot of more. We need
That's
a lot
interesting
more.
because the military, obviously, you know, I served with a lot of African Americans, but looking back, I think they were mostly from the South. I don't think, yeah, you're right. When I knew like urban, black or white, when I knew urban, I think it was mostly with the Merchant Marines, but with the regular service, I think it was more the South. Yep. Yeah.
But as an overall culture, man, it has to be, and you're going to see it's going to be a lot of people from the South, man. But when you start, you as a culture, man, we need more of that, because that it's almost like now you can say you have a stake invested in the future of the nation. Even though you're born as a citizen, you have a stake in the future. But from a psychological perspective,
That's right.
people need
Sport
to have
commitment.
some ownership in the future.
Yep.
And I'll be honest with you, every black person I've met that's been a veteran has a certain sense of ownership in this nation. It's not like they're a part of the nation inside of the nation. They have a sense of ownership. Well, man, I went and fought for this country. Blah, 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 blah. Awesome. Now, some of their opinions may be leftist, but then it's still this ownership that's taken. And I think that's one of the cultural problems that we have. And then when you add in the fact that you're bringing people in through open borders who don't have any ownership at all. I mean, you weren't even born here, man, and you just walked in the door. When we get to the point to where we got absentee ownership of a nation, it's going to fall. I'm sorry, man. There's no way,
man. And I'll tell you a racist thing is people will say to me, because I'm really strict about this, you know, closed borders, deport all the illegal immigrants, aliens, and people say to me, with a name like yours, with a name like your parents, your grandparents were immigrants. Like, I'm like, yeah, they came legally, and they hated illegal immigration too. And if you poll the Latino community, anybody who's here legally, anybody who's either a citizen, green card holder, even here legally, most of them want closed borders, and they oppose illegal immigration because it's just not a good thing. But to say to me that racially you should feel this way or that way, I'm like, that is nonsense.
That's racist. That's how I feel about it. When you tell me how I'm supposed to feel racially because of my race, that's racist. That's what it is. You racist. Don't tell me how I'm supposed to feel based upon my skin color. That's racist. You the racist.
Yeah.
And I've had these conversations, man.
You of all people. You see
what I'm saying? Like, come on. I've had these conversations, bro. And that's not racism. Yes, that's the definition of racism, bro. Is to tell me how I'm supposed to feel based upon race. You racist, and now you trying to make me racist. That don't make no sense. I know, because you stupid. You know what I'm saying?
Now, I got to tell you something funny that's happened in the last few days, though, because we got the new Pope, right?
Right.
All over Twitter, there's all these atheists, liberals, whatever, who don't care about Jesus at all, trying to use. They go, "Hey, the Pope is woke,
right?
So you have to be woke." Like the Pope said this, the Pope said that, and like if you're a true Christian, you'll do, and you know what my response is on Twitter? I go, it sounds like you're really interested in Christianity.
Yeah, sounds like
Why
you
don't
want
we
to meet
set up?
Jesus.
Let's set up. It is though. You know what I think though? I'm serious, James. I think that's God working on them. Like even though they're mocking Christianity, you know what? They're still reading something that came from from the Pope or from the Bible or whatever, right? Like a lot of them, the Bible said Jesus said you have to give all your. I'm like, that sounds great, man. Can we sit and talk about that?
No,
So I'm
that's
using
I
that
never
as an
thought about it
opportunity
that
there.
way. That is actually a good point. Even though they're mockers and scoffers, they're
Yeah.
still consuming the word of God in a process of trying to.
Yep.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way. You're right.
Yep.
You're 100% right. Wow.
That's
Wow.
that article I did. That's where that article came from that I just wrote, I don't know, a couple of days ago. I had this one. It was just about how, the big new bill, because they're all like, how could you be a Christian and vote against spending or, vote in favor of spending cuts? I'm like, show me where in the Bible did we have to vote for higher taxes?
Yeah, tell me where.
And then
Nowhere.
at the bottom third of that article is nothing but data about like how like soup kitchens, homeless shelter, it's all run by Christians. It's all voluntary because Jesus told us to do service. Jesus told us, to help the poor. He did not say you have to pay taxes. You have to pay taxes because it's the law.
Right.
You can't not pay taxes, but paying taxes is not tithing. And you don't get a blessing for paying tax. You get a blessing for doing good deeds voluntarily.
And it just goes to show as Christians, we have to realize that the Lord tests us on these things. So he's going to usher in circumstances in which we get the opportunity to be blessed by him if we do what we're supposed to do.
That's right.
But,
that's right.
So guys, when you see these opportunities, take the opportunity because it's an opportunity for a blessing. It only hurts you when you just ignore it. It really hurts bad when you ignore it. So it's like,
and sometimes he doesn't let you make it up. Like you're saying, you go out looking for, I'm going to go make this right now. It's like, no, you missed your opportunity.
You missed the opportunity because it was there for a specific reason. And the amazing thing about what's happening at the church is, so now we have the app where we can call the people out to help them. And I would be the one to call because, I got it in my car. He said, no, don't you call them. Let one of them call. One of the people in the administration call. I'm like, this is crazy. But I'm not an elder. I'm not none of that. So it's actually them being tested. And that's what's happening. I see that kind of test and growth process everywhere all around us in this nation going on. You see it in politics. You see it in you even see it in like sports, like WNBA sports. You see it going on. You see it in podcasting where you had just recently we had Joe Rogan show that he's went through a conversion where he's become Christian. But Joe Rogan, on a bigger scale, we saw with Elon Musk with the persecution Elon went through. It's happening. These little battles. I was saying this at the beginning. It's kind of like these little battles are lighting up on the battlefield left and right everywhere from a spiritual perspective, but you can see them in a natural perspective if you pay attention. The reason why I'm saying all this, ladies and gentlemen, is this as we close up this podcast. If you are facing one of those battles, it's very, very important that you go into prayer. And it's really simple. The battle is there, but it's already won. So it's most people don't get that. Then when they start talking about spiritual warfare and demons, I got to fight a demon. No, you're not to fight a demon. Jesus Christ already gave you victory. You are trying to establish that victory into this earth. So the conversation with me and Antonio is establishing a victory right now into the earth as it pertains to a lot of narratives that are out there. We just established a victory. And that's all it is. When he writes an article, he's establishing a version of victory into this earth from the spiritual perspective. So when you're dealing with problems with your family, dealing with problems with your health, you need to reinforce what was already said about you and the victory that was given to you. And then you enforce that onto this natural realm. Don't be, I got to fight the devil. No, he already been beat. If you start fighting him, then he gonna beat you. You can't beat the dude. He talked 1/3 of the angels from leaving heaven. How you gonna out-talk him? That's why Jesus beat him. So you just got to establish it by bringing it here and by using God's word. Now, I say all that to say, ladies and gentlemen, because I love you and I appreciate you. And I know a lot of you guys are going to listen to the very end. And the Lord wanted me to bring men like Antonio in for conversations, people who are experts, not people who just opinionated. You know what I'm saying? He wants experts. And guys, You can find him at Gateway Pundit where he writes. Antonio, tell me where else they can find you if they want to connect with you. What's your Twitter handle and all of those type of things?
Twitter, Antonio Graceffo. I think on all my stuff, all my media is Antonio Graceffo or Brooklyn Monk.
Brooklyn Monk. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys, he should share a boost in followers, and we'll go from there. Antonio, man, it's been fantastic, bro. I appreciate it. Anytime you need anything, man, reach out to me. Anything, bro. Anytime
Awesome,
you
man.
James, I got a vast network that
so
you
blessed,
can connect
man.
with.
I feel so blessed. So happy.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only James Williams. We are out of here, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.